my quilting friends, and welcome to the Machine Quilting Block Party. I'm so glad you're here and ready to learn how to piece our first block. Here it is, Half Square Sun, one of the most beautiful blocks I think in this whole quilt along. We're going to learn loads about piecing half square triangles and precision piecing so that all of our seams match up perfectly. So let's get started. Let's get started with our fabric prep. First thing I'm going to do is take my orange squares and layer them with the cream squares. So there should be 2 cream squares with 2 orange squares. We're going to stack those together. I'm going to do the same thing with the red squares. Stack together 2 red squares with 2 cream squares. And then I'm going to stack together the remaining orange square with 1 yellow square and 1 red square with 1 yellow square. And when I align these, just stack them together, get those edges nicely aligned so everything's stacked together just right. And then I'm going to take a ruler and marking pencil and mark a line diagonally from corner to corner. Now I am using a ceramic marking pencil here because I know it will wash out or erase out very easily from my fabric, but produces a really bright white line that's going to be easy to follow. So now that I've got all of this prepped up, I'm going to mark the diagonal line on the top of all of these stacks. Next, it's time to take it to the machine and start stitching. These are going to be our half square triangles. So we've got our squares prepared and they're stacked together with their edges nicely aligned. I'm going to slip it underneath my presser foot and align the edge of this foot with that marked diagonal line, and I'm going to start stitching. I want to stitch 1/4 inch exactly away from that marked line. And I do this using a patchwork foot. This is a 1/4 inch patchwork foot, and the reason it's special and the reason why you want to use one of these when you're piecing is because you get an absolute accurate dead set 1/4 inch from the needle to the edge of the foot. So I'm just going to buzz through all of these, stitching 1/4 inch from one side, and then I will rotate them around and stitch right through 1/4 inch on the opposite side of that diagonal line. And notice what I'm doing. I'm chain piecing, which means that every time I finish up one set of squares, stitching through them, I just grab another stack, make sure that they're nicely aligned with those edges even, slip it underneath the foot, and I just keep on stitching. I don't have to break thread with every single square. It makes it really, really quick. With one side of our half square triangle stitched, it's time to rotate it around and align that edge of the presser foot with that diagonal line again and stitch the opposite side. Now, one important tip as you're stitching is to lower your stitch length to 1.5 millimeters. And what that will do is it'll produce a really tight, dense stitch. You can see how tight my stitches are on this piece. And what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that those pieces are locked together, held securely. It's going to allow us to press our seam allowances open to reduce bulk for quilting. So make sure to dial your stitch length down before stitching all of your half square triangles. The next step is to cut our half square triangles apart. So I'm going to set it on my cutting mat, place a ruler so that the edge is aligned right with that diagonal marked line. I'll cut right across. So now we have 2 half square triangles, and this is the yellow and red set. And I'm just going to take my fingertips and just very, very gently finger press that seam allowance open. Remember, we were able to press the seam allowance open because we used a short stitch length, 1.5 millimeters, that produces really, really, really dense stitches. So it's very secure. It's important to finger press a seam open before pressing it with your iron. Otherwise, you really tend to dig into the seam and potentially distort your block. This seam is on the bias, the stretchiest part of the fabric, so you want to be really gentle and careful with it. So now I'm going to set it down, and when you press with quilting, you just press. You just set the iron down and hold it firmly in place. You don't wiggle it around a whole lot. I flip it over and press again. And here's a tip that I learned from a sewing class. Take your hand and place it over the block, and that's just going to press that heat into the fabrics and encourage that seam to stay completely flat and really reduce the bulk behind your quilt. Do the same thing with this one and just press. And I am using a hot, dry iron. I'm not using any steam. I like to use a hot, dry iron because it encourages the fabric to stay open and flat, but it doesn't start adding any moisture to the fabric. That one's really hot, so I can't really hold my hand over it too long. But now it's going to be perfectly flat, and now we have that nice, beautiful diagonal line. So that's how you make half square triangles. Refer to your pattern to know what size to cut the shape down to, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to piece our half square sun block together. So I've taken all of my pieces and arranged them in the shape of our beautiful block, and as you can see, I've already started to piece them together into rows. And here's how to do this in the most efficient way possible. You'll want to develop a system for flipping over the blocks and marking them somehow. I like to pin, and this is not really to pin to hold the pieces together securely or be really exact. It's really a pin to mark and show me what I'm stitching. And so I always pin this way with the pin inserted perpendicular with the seam I'm going to stitch. And that has really worked well for me, but definitely develop your own system that works well for you. So just flip over the square, grab a pin, and insert it perpendicular to the seam I'm going to stitch. Do the same thing up here. And you want to piece this together in sets of 2, and then you'll piece those 2 sets together to create the row. So now all these are ready to go. I'm going to take them to the machine and stitch through these seams. So I'm at my machine and I take out that pen and just make sure that the edges of those pieces are really perfectly aligned. You know, I pen pretty quickly, I flip things over, and I really wasn't paying attention to getting those edges aligned. That's what I do at the sewing machine right before I slip the 2 pieces underneath my foot and stitch through them. So here, as I'm stitching this seam, I'm wanting to make sure that both of the pieces are perfectly aligned together along the edge and right along the edge of that foot. I don't want any of the fabric extending beyond the edge of that foot. And I also don't want it slipping too far inward either. So it's a balancing act, making sure it's just exactly aligned. And we can chain piece with this too, just exactly the same way we did with the half square triangles, where you finish with 1 stitch, have 1 stitch off of the piece, and then if you have a knee lifter, or you can reach back to the back of the machine with your hand, lift up the foot slightly, and slip the next pieces underneath the foot and stitch right onto them. And again, just double check that your pieces are nicely aligned and right along the edge of that 1/4 inch patchwork foot. After getting all of the pieces stitched, I always like to return them to the block layout. So that way I make sure that everything has been pieced properly and then it's all going to create the block just exactly right. And then we will be pressing these seam allowances open, but you don't have to right now. Instead, go on ahead and flip over and pin your pieces and go on ahead and stitch all of the rows and then do your pressing. It's a little bit more efficient this way. So now the row is completely stitched, and again we want to finger press these seam allowances open so they're really flat and perfectly accurate. Sometimes when you press seams to one side, they just are so bulky and they kind of pull the fabric over, and that can lead to an inaccurate block. Sometimes I've lopped off the points of triangles because my seams were pressed to one side versus open. So I really prefer it this way. So now with it finger pressed, I'm just going to give the block a nice press with my iron. And again, try that hand trick. Once you press a seam, put your hand on top of it and that just holds the heat inside, encourages it to stay nice and flat. So there is that row done as well. Now the next step is to connect the rows together. And you can do 2 of these at a time. So I'm going to flip this one up and again place my pen parallel to the seam I'm going to stitch. I'm going to stitch right along this line. So I'm inserting my pen so it kind of points to that seam. I'm going to do the same thing here, flip the row over and insert my pen. And so keep in mind, these pins are not being inserted in order to accurately stitch these together. You can see just how far off they are. They're just inserted to guide me in piecing these together so I don't accidentally stitch the wrong side together. That would be a big mistake. So now that I'm at the machine, I'm going to take out that pen that was just a placement pen, just showing me which side of these pieces I was stitching. And now I'm going to take my time really getting these seams nicely aligned. And I do that by getting them generally in position, and then I pull back and I just double check that those seams are just exactly lined up, right on top of one another. And I really put a lot of pressure with my thumb and forefinger behind it, and then insert my pen. That's going to hold those securely together. And do the same thing on the last seam. I find that if I pin the first seam and the last seam, usually I don't have to worry so much about the middle seam. It's just going to kind of line up by default. So long as your cutting and your piecing was accurate up to this point, this should work out great. Okay, so just like before, I make sure that the edges of the pieces are in nice alignment. Slip it underneath my foot. Make sure that nothing is extending beyond the edge of that foot. And begin stitching. Now, as I get close to the pin, I want to check a couple things. I want to make sure my seam allowances aren't lipping up underneath the foot. They look good. And I want to very, very slowly get right up to the pin and then take it out. And then as I stitch over that seam, also making sure that my pieces have remained in good alignment. Every once in a while, the bulk of the seam will kind of catch on your foot. Sometimes you have to give it a little tug. Make sure it keeps on going. Okay, so this is the seam I don't pin because I just trust my cutting and piecing to come out just right. But it is important to make sure those pieces stay properly aligned on this edge. Okay, nearing our last pin. Just make sure that those seam allowances are not doing anything funky on the back. Make sure those edges are nicely aligned. Stitch on down. So now that we've stitched the seam, let's check our matching seam lines and make sure that everything looks just right. You can see just how beautiful this looks. And this is really just down to accurate cutting, good fabric preparation, accurate piecing and precision piecing, and everything comes out just exactly right. Even that seam that we did not pin came out beautifully. And I love these nice pointy points of our half square triangles. That looks great. So just repeat the same steps to piece all the rows of your block together, and you will have the center part stitched. So here is our half square sunblock all put together. You can see just how beautiful all of the half square triangles look when they're pieced together, and I can't wait to show you how we're going to quilt this block. Now, one thing to do right before you add the extra borders to the outside edges is to give the block a press, but you want to be sure to use a pressing cloth or just a bit of scrap fabric between your iron and the block. And the reason is we've got so many different seam allowances. If I flip up the block, you can see just how many seam allowances are underneath. If you hit that with the base of a hot iron, it can start to go really shiny on the surface, and that's basically just the iron hitting all those seam allowances, the highest raised parts, and kind of burning the fabric. So be really careful about that. Always use a pressing cloth at this point. So that is the center block completely done. Now we add the borders, and this is just a 2.5 inch strip. We add to the top and bottom, and also to both sides. So stitch the top and bottom first, press those seam allowances open, then stitch on the two sides, and your block will be complete. So that's it for our first block. I really hope that you enjoyed learning how to piece these half square triangles and putting it all together to create such a beautiful block. But you know, it's not done till it's quilted, so definitely check back by next Monday when we learn how to free motion quilt the surface with many beautiful designs. Click here to find the pattern for the half square sun block available at leahday.com and join in the fun of this machine quilting block party. Until next time, let's go quilt.